everybody of us is basically using or make use on an everyday basis our standards or the standards created in ETSI, because we have produced the GSM standard, and based on that in the 3GPP, in the so-called third generation partnership project, the UMTS standard, and the next generation following UMTS will be LTE, but also in the area called DECT, which you know from your handsets from at home, or in the ambulances or security area, there are standards called TETRA, which are widely used in Europe, and in the TV area it's called DVB, which you probably all know of and probably use at home also. The standards are extremely important for the ICT technology because they provide a lot of benefits for all parties involved. One of the core things is interoperability of the different technologies involved, but also there's an increase of competitiveness, efficiency, reliability, and at the end of the chain, the customer is getting an increased customer satisfaction. And obviously also one of the benefits of standards is innovation. And this is a common criteria, well, that's something that is in common, that standards have in common with patents, because both encourage innovation and both increase the diffusion of innovation. However, standards and IPR are in a so-called antinomic relation, because standards are intended to be used by everyone, and an IPR based on its nature is meant to be used exclusively and privately by the IPR owner. At least the IPR owner has the right, privately and exclusively. And therefore there's an inherent conflict in standards and IPR when the technical content of a standard falls within the scope of a patent, and there we talk of an essential IPR. However, within ETSI and obviously also in other standardization organizations, there's a good solution based on a self-regulation principle. And in ETSI, we are solving the conflict by taking into account all the different interests of all involved stakeholders. And this is done by basically two criteria. One is the early disclosure of the IPR that are involved within the standardization process. So every member participating in the standardization process has to disclose as early as possible its essential IPR that are relevant for a specific standard. And then as a second step, each IPR holder is asked whether the holder is willing to grant licenses on fair and reasonable terms and conditions. With this, the standardization process is transparent, and at the end of the day, the patented technology is accessible for all the ones that want to implement the standard. Nowadays, one can say that the outset is getting more complex than maybe than it was maybe 10 years ago, when the times when the GSM standard was developed, because on the one hand, the technology is getting more complex. I mean, nowadays, as you all know, in your handsets, there are different layers of technologies. There's not only one standard used, but the smartphones of today, they can do basically everything. And so you have VLAN, UMTS, GSM, etc. included. Then the fact is that the technology in the ICT area is used on a global market that involves all different countries of the world. And then we are seeing today new business models around IPR that are focusing exclusively on the monetizing of the IPR and not taking part in products elaboration anymore. However, overall one can say ETSI is providing through its self-regulations a solution for the majority of cases, but obviously cannot solve all issues. A classical example would be a patent ambush situation where a participant is not declaring its essential IPR, and there the activities of competition authorities is necessary. Overall, I would like to state that the specific situation of standards in IPR requires high attention and recognition within all enforcement and protection systems for IPR. And as we heard today, that we're working on an IPR strategy of Europe, this becomes even more true because the benefits of standards need to be taken into account in such IPR strategy for Europe. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the explanation on standardization and also the way of showing that standardization brings platforms like GSM and stuff for innovation to happen, which is very nice. Finally, I would like to go to Mr. Velasco Martin and ask you about the impact. We have talked a lot about counterfeiting already in the previous debate, but what is the real impact of this counterfeiting on Europe's competitiveness?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It has an enormous impact. Today I come to talk about how the European Union protects this very valuable asset that it has in third countries. So I come from DG Trade of the Commission. We deal with situations outside of the European Union. And since time is very limited, I will focus on three of the main instruments we have to protect this asset. One of them is called ACTA, a project for an anti-counterfeiting trade agreement that is being negotiated among a limited number of countries. The second, I will focus on some of our bilateral efforts, and namely with countries like China, where a lot of the problems come from. And third, very briefly, I'll address an enforcement survey that we will soon release that identifies periodically the most problematic areas where we have to deal with the problem. But to come back to your question, why does this matter? I'll give you very briefly some figures. It's difficult to quantify because by nature counterfeiting, piracy, other infringements are illegal. And very often they are undertaken by criminal organizations, which are quite bad at keeping accounting records. So it's difficult, but the OECD has made a study, is about to conclude the study, but they have already issued a first report, which is very important, that established that infringements of physical intellectual property rights, so they excluded from their study everything that is going on through the internet, and they also excluded everything that is not crossing a border, even physical goods which are not crossing a border. So in their result, the one I will mention, there is not accounted for instance, all the counterfeiting within the European Union or within China. But with these exclusions, they established that around 200 billion euro every year is the value of this parallel economy that is sapping and undermining one of our most important competitive assets. This is more than the gross domestic product of 150 countries.